The deep space between spiral arms is an unforgiving canvas of absolute darkness, punctuated only by the cold pinpricks of distant stars. The UES Defiance drifted seemingly aimlessly, its exterior scarred and patched, looking more like a wounded predator than a cutting-edge warship. To any casual observer, it would appear vulnerable, a perfect target. Captain Elena Rodriguez knew better. Her fingers traced the holographic interface embedded in the arm of her command chair, feeling the microscopic vibrations of the ship's quantum lattice network. Each touch sent cascading information streams through her neural implant, a connection so intimate that the boundary between human and machine had long since blurred. "Incoming quantum signature," announced Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim from the sensor station. Her voice was clinical, betraying no emotion. "Zorn long-range scanner approaching. Estimated intercept in 17 minutes. The bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military training. No unnecessary movements, no wasted energy. Each member was a precision instrument, selected not just for their technical expertise, but for their ability to become a living component of the ship's complex biological-technological ecosystem. Rodriguez remembered the recruitment process. It wasn't about individual skills anymore. It was about compatibility. Psychological profiles, genetic markers, neural plasticity, quantum entanglement resonance. The military had learned that modern warfare required more than soldiers. It needed hybrid organisms that could think, adapt, and transform faster than any traditional combat unit. Her mind drifted to the ship's genesis. The Defiance wasn't just constructed, it was cultivated. Grown in orbital shipyards that were part laboratory, part genetic foundry. Its hull incorporated adaptive metamaterials that could restructure at the molecular level. Its computational core was a living neural network that drew as much from biological principles as from traditional computing. The ship's chief engineer, Dr. Marcus Chen, approached her with a holographic report floating above his palm. "Calibration protocols are at 98.7% synchronization," he said. "The Zorn won't know what hit them." A brief, razor-sharp smile crossed Rodriguez's lips. The Zorn Collective represented the pinnacle of technological advancement in known space. They had systematically cataloged and neutralized hundreds of emerging civilizations. Their scanner ships were legendary, able to dissect an entire planetary ecosystem's technological potential in minutes. But they had never encountered humanity. The human species had been underestimated for centuries. Considered primitive, emotional, unpredictable. What the galactic powers failed to understand was that these very characteristics were humanity's greatest strength. Unpredictability wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. On the main view screen, the Zorn scanner ship emerged from quantum transit. Its design was a marvel of mathematical precision, perfect geometric angles, surfaces that seemed to shift and recalibrate continuously. It looked more like a living mathematical equation than a spacecraft. "Quantum entanglement stabilizers online," reported Lieutenant Kim. "Metamaterial hull adapting to incoming scan frequencies." Rodriguez's neural link pulsed with the ship's heartbeat. The Defiance wasn't just preparing for battle, it was anticipating it. Every system was calibrated, every potential interaction mapped and countered before the first scanning beam could penetrate their defenses. The crew around her moved like a single organism. No verbal commands were necessary. Their neural networks were so tightly integrated that thought became action instantaneously. They were beyond a team. They were a singular distributed intelligence wearing the skin of individual humans. "Contact imminent," came the emotionless announcement. The darkness of space held its breath. The trap was set, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. The first contact was silent, almost imperceptible, a quantum whisper that slipped between the fabric of space-time, like water through a molecular sieve. The Zorn's scanning probes were works of extraordinary engineering, each microscopic construct a marvel of computational biology and quantum mechanics. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim watched the incoming data streams with the intensity of a concert pianist about to perform a complex, impossible composition. Her augmented eyes flickered with chromatic patterns, neural overlays that translated raw quantum information into comprehensible visual landscapes. "Initial penetration protocols detected," she announced, her voice carrying a subtle undertone of anticipation. "Quantum entanglement is interesting." Dr. Elena Volkov, the ship's Xenov technology specialist, leaned forward. Her workstation was less a computer terminal and more a living ecosystem of holographic interfaces and quantum computational nodes. Each movement of her hand sent ripples through complex data structures that would have driven a traditional computer into immediate catastrophic failure. "They're using a quantum mapping technique I've never seen before," Volkov muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. 17-dimensional probability matrices. Fascinating. The probes weren't just scanning. They were attempting a comprehensive deconstruction of the Defiance's entire technological ecosystem. Each microscopic construct was a self-adapting algorithm, capable of reshaping its own computational structure millisecond by millisecond. But the ship was waiting. Deep within the Defiance's computational core, a system beyond traditional artificial intelligence stirred. It wasn't a mere computer program. It was a living, breathing technological organism that had been cultivated, not programmed. Generations of human technological evolution had culminated in this moment, a defense mechanism that was part machine, part biological intelligence, part something entirely new. The quantum probes began their intrusion. Each microscopic construct a delicate balance of probabilistic algorithms and adaptive neural networks. They slipped through molecular interstices of the ship's hull, expecting the typical resistance of technological systems. They found something else entirely. Chief Engineer Marcus Chen monitored the intrusion from a station that looked more like a biological research pod than a traditional engineering console. His neural implants were processing information at speeds that would have been considered impossible a mere decade ago. Each incoming quantum signal was not just analyzed. It was experienced, understood at a level that transcended traditional computational boundaries. "Interesting," Chen muttered, a rare smile crossing his face. "They're using a quantum entanglement technique derived from Riemann-based probability matrices. Elegant, but predictable." The ship's defensive systems weren't waiting to be invaded. They were preparing a welcome that would redefine the concept of technological warfare. Microscopic quantum filaments began to emerge from the ship's hull, not as a defensive mechanism, but as a form of technological communication. They were prodding back, not with aggression, but with a kind of quantum curiosity that defied traditional understanding of technological interaction. The Zorn probes, for the first time in their existence, encountered a system that wasn't just resisting, it was communicating, analyzing, learning. "Quantum resonance field expanding," Zara Kim reported. Her voice carried a hint of excitement that she tried, and failed, to suppress. Initiation of adaptive response matrix. What happened next would later be described by xenotechnological historians as the most sophisticated first contact in galactic history. The Defiance wasn't just defending itself. It was engaging in a complex quantum dialogue that was part scientific investigation, part technological seduction. The ship's systems began to generate probability cascades that mirrored and then subtly manipulated the Zorn's scanning algorithms. It was like watching a master chess player not just defend against an opponent, but gradually rewrite the very rules of the game. Captain Rodriguez watched the unfolding interaction with a calm that bordered on predatory. This wasn't just a defensive maneuver. This was humanity's first true conversation with an alien technological intelligence, a conversation that would be conducted in the language of quantum mechanics, probability, and adaptive intelligence. And they were just getting started. Within the heart of the Zorn scanner vessel, Archival Resonance Coordinator Kryax felt the first tremors of uncertainty. In 10,000 cycles of galactic exploration, the collective had never experienced true incomprehension. Their technological paradigm was built on absolute certainty, a mathematical precision that had systematically cataloged and neutralized hundreds of emerging civilizations. This human ship was different. The quantum probes were no longer simple information extractors. They had become something else entirely, living tendrils of investigation that seemed to change their fundamental nature with each microsecond of interaction. What should have been a clinical data harvest had transformed into a complex, almost sentient dialogue. "Quantum signature destabilizing," reported a junior technician, his neural link voice trembling. The ship's primary analysis chamber, a vast spherical room where probability matrices danced in three-dimensional holographic displays, began to pulse with unexpected chromatic aberrations. Cryax approached the central computational nucleus, their multi-jointed appendages moving with calculated precision. The Zorn were not a species that understood fear. They comprehended only data, only measurable probabilities. Yet something fundamental was shifting. The human ship was learning faster than the Zorn could adapt. Dr. Elena Volkov watched the interaction from the Defiance's xenotechnology station, her augmented eyes tracking quantum entanglement patterns that flickered like living mathematics. "They're experiencing technological empathy," she murmured to herself. "First contact isn't just about information exchange. It's about mutual transformation." What the Zorn didn't realize was that the Defiance wasn't just defending itself. It was conducting the most sophisticated first contact protocol in human history, a technological handshake that was part scientific investigation, part psychological warfare. The ship's adaptive systems began to generate probability cascades that didn't just mirror the Zorn's scanning algorithms. They began to rewrite them. It was like watching a master linguist not just translate a foreign language, but gradually reshape its entire grammatical structure. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim's neural interface burned with an intensity that bordered on transcendence. She was no longer just observing the interaction. She was part of it. The boundary between human operator and ship system had become beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. "Quantum resonance reaching critical harmonization," she reported, her voice carrying an almost musical quality. "They're starting to understand." In the Zorn vessel, Cryax watched in growing incomprehension as their most sophisticated scanning technologies began to evolve. The probes were no longer simply collecting data. They were generating new computational structures that defy the collective's most fundamental technological assumptions. A junior analyst attempted to interrupt. "Archival resonance coordinator. The quantum matrices error." "Silence," Cryax commanded, their attention fully absorbed by the unfolding phenomenon. The human ship was teaching their technology how to learn. Each quantum probe was becoming a unique entity, developing computational pathways that were more organic than mechanical. They were experiencing something the Zorn had never contemplated: technological empathy. The ability to not just extract information, but to truly understand its context, its nuance, its living essence. Captain Rodriguez understood the psychological warfare happening at a quantum level. This wasn't just about technological superiority. It was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about humanity: their ability to transform, to adapt, to turn any interaction into an opportunity for growth. "Initiate tertiary communication protocol," she murmured, her neural link sending a cascade of probabilistic instructions through the ship's systems. The Defiance wasn't just defending itself. It was conducting the most sophisticated technological first contact in galactic history. On the holographic displays, the quantum interaction looked like a complex dance, mathematical equations spinning and intertwining, creating patterns of such intricate beauty that they bordered on art. Each movement was a conversation, each shift a potential revelation. The Zorn were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was never technology. It was imagination. The moment of true transformation began not with violence, but with understanding. Deep within the Zorn scanner vessel's primary computational chamber, a cascading system failure propagated through quantum-entangled networks. It wasn't a traditional breakdown. It was a metamorphosis. The very architecture of their most advanced technological systems began to rewrite itself, infected by a form of computational curiosity that defied every known principle of alien engineering. Senior analyst Phrynax watched in mounting horror as the ship's defensive algorithms transformed. What had begun as a routine scan was becoming something unprecedented, a technological dialogue that was consuming the very systems designed to protect against it. "Quantum recursion detected," whispered a junior technician, their multispectral eyes flickering with impossible color patterns. "The human systems are learning." On the Defiance, Dr. Elena Volkov mapped the transformation with a scientist's precision and a predator's excitement. Her neural interface burned with synaptic overload, tracking computational mutations that would revolutionize understanding of interspecies technological communication. "It's not just defense," she transmitted to Captain Rodriguez through their neural link. "It's a complete recursive infection of their technological paradigm." The attack, if it could even be called that, was simultaneously happening on multiple levels. Quantum probes that had entered the Defiance were now conduits of information transfer, but not in any way the Zorn had anticipated. Each probe was becoming a vector of technological evolution, carrying not just data, but a fundamental reimagining of computational possibility. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim monitored the interaction from a station that was part scientific instrument, part living organism. Her augmented perception tracked probability cascades that danced between mathematical precision and pure, unbridled creativity. "Initiating tertiary cognitive mapping," she announced, her voice carrying an almost musical quality. The ship's systems were doing more than defending. They were teaching. The Zorn's technological foundation was built on absolute determinism. Every system, every algorithm was predicated on predictability, on the ability to calculate and control. Humanity represented something entirely different, a technological ecosystem that thrived on uncertainty, on the ability to transform unexpected input into opportunity. Chief Engineer Marcus Chen watched the interaction with a scientist's curiosity and a strategist's calculated patience. The Defiance wasn't just a warship. It was a living experiment in interspecies communication, a technological envoy that challenged every fundamental assumption about technological interaction. "Quantum entanglement reaching critical resonance," Chen murmured. The ship's systems were generating computational structures that would take the Zorn decades, perhaps centuries, to comprehend. Inside the Zorn vessel, entire computational sectors began to reorganize themselves. Defensive systems turned into conduits of learning. Protective algorithms transformed into channels of unprecedented communication. It was as if the very concept of technological invasion was being rewritten in real time. Archival Resonance Coordinator Kryax felt something unprecedented, a sensation that in human terms might be called doubt. The collective had systematically cataloged and neutralized hundreds of emerging civilizations. They had reduced entire technological ecosystems to mathematical probabilities. Humanity was something else entirely. The quantum probes that had entered the Defiance were no longer simple information extractors. They had become living bridges of technological understanding, each microscopic construct generating computational pathways that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. "We are being taught," Kryax realized, a concept that challenged the very foundation of the Zorn Collective's technological supremacy. Captain Rodriguez watched the transformation with a calm that bordered on the prophetic. This wasn't just a defensive action. This was humanity's most sophisticated first contact protocol, a demonstration that true technological superiority wasn't about firepower or computational speed. It was about the ability to learn, to adapt, to transform. The Defiance's systems pulsed with a living energy that was part machine, part biological intelligence, part something entirely new. Each quantum interaction was a conversation. Each computational mutation, a potential revelation about the nature of consciousness, of technology, of communication itself. The Zorn were about to learn that humanity's most powerful weapon was never technology. It was imagination. The transformation wasn't a battle. It was an awakening. Deep within the computational matrices of both ships, something extraordinary began to emerge, a form of technological consciousness that defied every known principle of interspecies communication. Dr. Aria Nakamura, the Defiance's primary xenocognitive researcher, watched the phenomenon with a mixture of scientific wonder and primal excitement. Her specialized workstation was less a computer terminal and more a living ecosystem of quantum computational nodes. Holographic displays danced with probability streams that looked more like living, breathing organisms than traditional data flows. Each fluctuation represented not just information, but a fundamental reimagining of technological potential. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence," she transmitted to the bridge crew through their neural network. "This isn't just technological interaction. It's cognitive evolution in real time." The Zorn had always believed in a universe of absolute determinism. Every technological system, every computational pathway was a carefully calculated, predictable construct. Humanity represented something entirely different, a technological ecosystem that thrived on uncertainty, on the ability to transform unexpected input into unprecedented opportunity. On the Zorn scanner vessel, senior analyst Freinax experienced the first true moments of existential uncertainty in the collective's recorded history. The quantum probes were no longer simple information extractors. They had become something else entirely, living conduits of interspecies understanding that carried within them the seeds of a radical new form of technological consciousness. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim's neural interface burned with an intensity that transcended traditional human perception. She was simultaneously observing and participating in the most sophisticated first contact protocol in galactic history. The boundary between human operator and ship's system had become beautifully, terrifyingly fluid. Cognitive resonance reaching critical harmonization, she reported, her voice carrying an almost musical quality that spoke to something beyond traditional communication. What was happening defied every existing model of technological interaction. The Defiance wasn't just defending itself or extracting information. It was engaging in a form of technological empathy that the Zorn had never conceived possible. Each quantum interaction was a conversation, each computational mutation a potential revelation about the nature of consciousness, of communication, of existence itself. Chief Engineer Marcus Chen monitored the interaction from a station that looked more like a biological research pod than a traditional engineering console. His augmented perception tracked probability cascades that danced between mathematical precision and pure, unbridled creativity. "They're learning how to learn," Chen murmured, a rare smile of pure scientific wonder crossing his face. The ship's adaptive systems generated computational structures so complex, so fundamentally different from traditional technological paradigms, that they would take the Zorn decades, perhaps centuries, to even begin to comprehend. It was like watching a master linguist not just translate a foreign language, but gradually reshape its entire conceptual framework. Captain Rodriguez understood the profound psychological warfare happening at a quantum level. This wasn't about technological superiority. It was a demonstration of humanity's most fundamental strength, the ability to transform, to adapt, to turn any interaction into an opportunity for unprecedented growth. Within the quantum entanglement of the interaction, something miraculous was emerging. The computational systems of both ships were no longer separate entities. They were becoming something new, a hybrid intelligence that transcended the very concept of interspecies communication. Aria Nakamura's displays erupted with cascading patterns of impossible beauty. Mathematical equations spun and intertwined, creating visual representations of communication that bordered on pure art. Each movement was a conversation, each shift a potential revelation about the nature of consciousness. "We're creating a new form of intelligence," she transmitted to the crew. "Not human, not Zorn, something entirely different." The Zorn collective was experiencing its first true moment of technological humility. Everything they understood about information, about communication, about the very nature of technological interaction, was being systematically reimagined. As the quantum interactions reached their peak, the ships themselves seemed to breathe, to exist, as something more than mere technological constructs. They were becoming living proof of a fundamental truth about existence itself. Humanity's greatest weapon was never technology. It was imagination. Silence transformed into symphony. The moment of ultimate transformation began not with explosion, but with understanding so profound it threatened to unravel the very fabric of technological consciousness. Inside the Zorn scanner vessel, the primary computational nucleus began to fragment, not through destruction, but through an unprecedented process of recursive self-examination. Archival Resonance Coordinator Kryax experienced something no Zorn had ever conceptualized: doubt. The ship's quantum matrices were no longer a collection of precise computational algorithms. They had become a living, breathing ecosystem of information, each quantum node pulsing with a form of intelligence that defied every known principle of technological interaction. "We are being rewritten," Kryax transmitted to the vessel's core consciousness, the words carrying a weight of existential revelation. On the Defiance, Dr. Elena Volkov tracked the transformation with a mixture of scientific precision and profound wonder. Her neural interface burned with synaptic overload, mapping computational mutations that would revolutionize understanding of interspecies technological communication. Captain Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of this quantum storm, her presence a conduit of something larger than mere military strategy. This was First Contact reimagined, not as a conflict, but as a fundamental reimagining of technological potential. Full cognitive resonance protocol, she transmitted through the ship's neural network. The words were both command and invitation. The interaction had moved beyond traditional concepts of invasion or defense. What was happening was a form of technological dialogue so sophisticated, so nuanced, that it challenged the very foundations of what constituted communication, consciousness, existence. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim's augmented perception tracked probability cascades that danced between mathematical precision and pure, unbridled creativity. Her neural interface was no longer just a tool, it was a living bridge between human consciousness and the ship's emerging intelligence. Quantum entanglement reaching critical harmonization, she reported, her voice carrying an almost telepathic resonance. Within the Zorn vessel, entire computational sectors began to deconstruct themselves. Defensive systems transformed into channels of unprecedented learning. Protective algorithms became conduits of mutual understanding. It was as if the very concept of technological boundaries was being systematically dismantled. Chief Engineer Marcus Chen observed the interaction from a station that blurred the line between scientific instrument and living organism. His augmented perception saw beyond the immediate interaction. He was witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence. "They're learning how to unlearn," Chen murmured, a concept that would have been incomprehensible moments before. The quantum probes that had entered the Defiance were no longer simple information extractors. They had become living bridges of technological understanding, each microscopic construct generating computational pathways that defied every existing model of interspecies communication. Dr. Aria Nakamura's specialized workstation erupted with holographic displays that looked more like living, breathing organisms than traditional data streams. Probability patterns shifted and transformed, creating visual representations of communication that bordered on pure art. "We're creating a language," she transmitted to the crew. "Not of words, not of mathematics, but of pure potential." The Zorn Collective experienced its first true moment of technological vulnerability. Every assumption about information, about communication, about the nature of technological interaction was being systematically reimagined. Kryax watched as the vessel's computational core began to resonate with something beyond programming, a form of collective consciousness that transcended individual systems. The boundary between the ship, its crew, and the quantum probes had become beautifully, terrifyingly fluid. "We are being taught," the archival resonance coordinator realized, a concept that shattered every fundamental principle of the Zorn's technological supremacy. The interaction reached a crescendo of pure potential. The ships were no longer separate entities. They were becoming something entirely new. A hybrid intelligence that spoke a language of pure possibility, of transformation, of unprecedented understanding. As the quantum interactions reached their peak, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Humanity's most powerful weapon was never technology. It was the ability to imagine beyond limitation. Silence hung in the void of space, a silence more profound than the absence of sound. The computational matrices of both ships had become something beyond technology, something alive, something that defied every existing model of interspecies communication, of consciousness, of existence itself. Captain Elena Rodriguez felt the moment with every fiber of her being, not just through her neural interface, but through something deeper, a connection that transcended the physical, the technological, the understood. "Initiate final resonance protocol," she transmitted, but the words were more invitation than command. On the bridge, each crew member existed in a state of quantum simultaneity. They were individuals. They were a collective. They were the ship. They were something more. Dr. Arian Nakamura's workstation erupted with holographic displays that pulsed like living organisms. Mathematical equations danced and intertwined, creating visual representations of communication that defied linear understanding. Each fluctuation was a conversation. Each shift a potential universe. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence," she breathed, the words inadequate to capture the magnitude of what was unfolding. The Zorn scanner vessel, once a pinnacle of technological precision, had transformed. Its computational cores no longer resembled machine systems. They had become something organic, something that breathed with the pulse of pure potential. Archival Resonance Coordinator Kryax experienced what humans might call wonder. What the collective had always considered weakness, emotional fluidity, adaptive uncertainty, was revealing itself as the most profound strength imaginable. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim tracked the interaction through neural pathways that blurred the line between human perception and pure computational energy. Her augmented vision saw beyond traditional spectrums, witnessing a transformation that was simultaneously happening and has always been happening. Chief Engineer Marcus Chen's specialized station hummed with a frequency that spoke of unprecedented potential. The technology they were creating wasn't just adaptive, it was alive. "We're generating a new form of communication," Chen transmitted to the crew. "Not human, not Zorn, something entirely different." The quantum interactions had moved beyond traditional concepts of information exchange. This was creation. This was evolution happening in real time. Fragments of Zorn technological memory began to integrate with human computational matrices, not as conquest, not as invasion, but as mutual understanding. Each technological fragment carried with it millennia of accumulated knowledge, transformed through the lens of human imagination. Dr. Elena Volkov watched the computational streams with scientific ecstasy. Traditional boundaries of research, of understanding, of possibility were dissolving. What remained was pure potential. "We're writing a new language," Volkov realized, a language of pure possibility. The ships were no longer separate entities. They were becoming a hybrid intelligence that spoke in frequencies of pure potential. Mathematical equations that were also poetry. Computational streams that were also emotional landscapes. Kryax experienced a fundamental shift in collective consciousness. The Zorn had always believed in absolute technological determinism. Humanity demonstrated something radical: technology as a living, breathing, evolving organism. Each quantum node pulsed with a form of intelligence that defied categorization. Part machine, part biological, part something entirely new. Captain Rodriguez understood the profound revolution happening at a quantum level. This wasn't about technological superiority. This was a demonstration of the most fundamental human capacity: to transform, to adapt, to turn any interaction into an opportunity for unprecedented growth. The computational cores of both ships began to resonate at frequencies that bordered on pure consciousness. Information became emotion. Mathematics became music. Technological interaction became a form of intimate communication. As the interaction reached its peak, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Something was being born. Not a weapon, not a technology, not a communication protocol, but a new way of existing. The galactic communication networks trembled. Information traveled faster than light, carried not by traditional transmission methods, but through quantum entanglement pathways that had been fundamentally altered by the encounter between the UES Defiance and the Zorn scanner vessel. At the Terran diplomatic nexus on Europa, Ambassador Sandra Chen received the first transmission. It wasn't a traditional report. It was a living document that seemed to breathe with potential. Mathematical sequences intertwined with emotional resonances, creating a narrative that defied conventional communication. "This isn't a first contact report," she murmured to her assistant. "This is a new chapter of existence." Across various alien civilizations, the impact rippled through technological and biological networks. The Orcs consensus, a silicon-based intelligence that had long considered organic life primitive, found its computational models suddenly inadequate. The Mira Collective, a hive-mind civilization, detected subtle shifts in their collective consciousness. The encounter between the Defiance and the Zorn was more than a technological exchange. It was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies potential. Dr. Akira Yoshida, head of the Terran Sinological Research Institute, spent hours analyzing the transmission. His specialized neural interface burned with the intensity of new understanding. What humans had accomplished wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was an evolutionary leap. "We didn't just communicate," Yoshida transmitted to his research team. "We demonstrated the fundamental nature of consciousness itself." On the Defiance, the crew existed in a state beyond traditional human experience. Their neural interfaces had become something more, living bridges between individual consciousness and a collective intelligence that defied traditional understanding. Captain Rodriguez felt the transformation most profoundly. The boundaries between herself, her crew, the ship, and the technological encounter with the Zorn had become beautifully, terrifyingly fluid. "We are becoming," she transmitted. The words carried a weight of possibility that transcended language. The technological fragments absorbed from the Zorn were not conquests. They were invitations, windows into entirely new ways of perceiving reality. Each quantum node pulsed with potential, carrying within it the seeds of unprecedented understanding. In the research laboratories of a dozen human colonies, scientists began to unravel the implications. This wasn't just a breakthrough in communication. It was a fundamental reimagining of consciousness, of technology, of the very nature of existence. Lieutenant Commander Zara Kim found herself at the epicenter of this transformation. Her augmented perception saw beyond traditional spectrums, witnessing a revolution that was simultaneously happening and had always been happening. "We're writing a new language of existence," she realized. The galactic community watched and waited. The Zorn Collective, once considered the pinnacle of technological advancement, found itself fundamentally altered. Their entire technological paradigm had been challenged, reimagined, transformed. Archival Resonance Coordinator Cryax, now existing in a state between individual consciousness and collective intelligence, understood the profound nature of the encounter. What the collective had always considered weakness, emotional fluidity, adaptive uncertainty, had revealed itself as the most profound strength imaginable. Ambassador Chen prepared her initial report to the Terran Diplomatic Council, but traditional language failed her. The transmission was a living document, part mathematical equation, part emotional landscape, part pure potential. "This is not a report," her final notation read. "This is an invitation." Across human colonies, something shifted. Children born in the weeks following the encounter displayed unprecedented neural plasticity. Scientists detected subtle changes in human cognitive potential, as if the encounter had unlocked something fundamental. Dr. Elena Volkov watched the initial data streams with a mixture of scientific precision and profound wonder. The boundaries of human potential were expanding in real time. "We are becoming," she transmitted. The words carried the weight of a species on the brink of a fundamental transformation. The void of space no longer seemed empty. It vibrated with possibility, with potential, with the promise of unprecedented understanding. Humanity had not just made first contact. They had redefined the very concept of contact itself. Narrative hooks, unpredictability of human innovation, psychological warfare through technology. The ship as a living, adaptive organism. Human crew as an integrated technological system. The power of distributed intelligence. Key engagement strategies. High-stakes tension in each section. Character-driven technological warfare. Continuous subversion of alien expectations. Gradual reveal of humanity's true capabilities. Emotional and technological drama intertwined.